I was standing by the gift table, holding a baby blanket I'd spent 2 weeks crocheting, when my younger sister tapped her glass and said, "I have something to tell you all." The room quieted instantly. Dozens of faces turned toward her, some curious, others already bracing for drama. But no one, not even I, could have expected what came next. Sabrina Carter was glowing, 8 months pregnant, wearing a silky pale blue maternity dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked every bit the center of attention. The decorations in our parents' living room were ridiculous. Pink and blue streamers, a towering diaper cake, and party games that had already dragged on too long. But this was the crescendo. She placed one hand on her belly, looked directly at me and said, "The father of this baby is Noah Monroe." There was a moment of pure silence. Not shock, silence. And then it hit me. Gasps, murmurs, chair scraping. I couldn't breathe. Noah Monroe. My husband. My dead husband. My heart dropped so hard it felt like it cracked something inside me. I gripped the edge of the table just to stay standing. I wanted to scream, to laugh, to fall through the floor. Instead, I stood there frozen as Sabrina continued, her voice clear, rehearsed, and disturbingly proud. "Since this baby is Noah's only child," she said, "I have the right to half of everything he left behind, his estate, his accounts, his downtown apartment. My child deserves his legacy. Half of everything. Half of the $12 million my late husband left behind after building a tech firm from scratch. Half of the home we lived in together. Half of the life I had been trying to hold onto since he died." I looked at my parents, expecting at least some trace of confusion or outrage. But their faces, they weren't surprised. My father's mouth was tight, arms crossed. My mother was holding Sabrina's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. They knew. They already knew. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My body was shaking so violently I had to press both palms against the table. The blanket in my hand slipped to the floor. Sabrina turned to me with that infuriating half-smile she always wore when she got exactly what she wanted. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she said, her tone syrupy sweet, "but you deserve to know. And so does everyone else." The room was spinning. My skin felt hot and cold at the same time. I backed away slowly, then bolted through the crowd, bumping shoulders and knocking over a plate of cupcakes without even noticing. Someone called after me, maybe my mom. I didn't turn around. By the time I reached my car, I was crying so hard I couldn't get the key into the ignition. The sound of my heartbeat pounded in my ears like war drums. I finally drove off, the blanket still on the floor behind me, party decorations fading in the rearview mirror. I didn't know what hurt more, that Noah had betrayed me, that my sister had done this, or that my parents had stood behind her with pride. But what I did know even in that moment was this: whatever they'd started, I was going to finish. The drive home was a blur of taillights and tears. I couldn't remember the turns I took or the traffic lights I ran. When I finally pulled into the driveway of the house Noah and I once called home, I sat in the car for nearly 20 minutes, unable to move. Everything inside me felt broken, twisted in a way that would never be the same again. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just sat on the edge of the bed staring at the photo of our wedding day. His smile so wide, his hands around my waist like I was the center of his world. I traced the outline of his face with my finger and whispered, "Why?" At 2:13 a.m., my phone lit up. It was Sabrina. A photo. Noah and Sabrina. In a hotel room. His arms around her waist. Her phone in the mirror, capturing the kiss. My stomach turned so violently I barely made it to the bathroom in time. When I came back, another message was waiting. Another photo. This time at a restaurant I didn't recognize, their fingers intertwined across the table. Smiling like they didn't just destroy someone. Then came the texts. "I don't love her anymore. After the divorce, we'll tell everyone. I want a life with you and our baby." Each one landed like a hammer to the chest. Each one chipped away at the version of Noah I had believed in, loved, cried for, mourned. The timestamp stretched back 6 months. During that same time, I had been injecting hormones, crying in sterile clinics, blaming myself for every negative pregnancy test. I remembered the way Noah would hold my hand during appointments, tell me not to stress, promise we'd try again next month, all while sneaking away to hotels with my sister. At 4 a.m., I found myself in the nursery we'd started to prepare before giving up. The paint samples were still taped to the walls. The crib was half assembled, gathering dust. I sat on the floor and stared at the tiny shoes I had bought out of hope. Now they looked like artifacts from another life. My phone buzzed again. "I know this is hard," Sabrina had written, "but we can make this work. You and I are still sisters. That baby is your blood too." I didn't reply. I couldn't. Instead, I deleted every message and threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a sharp crack, the sound echoing through the empty hallway. I didn't even check to see if it broke. That night, something in me began to shift. The grief was still there, sharp and raw, but under it, something darker had started to bloom. Resolve. They wanted to drag me into their lie, force me to play along, hand over half of Noah's legacy to a child I had no reason to trust. But I wasn't going to crumble the way they expected. They thought they knew me, thought I was too soft, too obedient, too desperate for their approval. They were wrong. At exactly 6:04 a.m., the phone rang again. I had just managed to close my eyes for the first time all night when the screen lit up with Mom. I stared at it until it stopped ringing. A minute later, it rang again, Dad. I answered on the third call, half out of habit, half because something in me wanted to hear their excuse. What I got instead was strategy. "Valerie!" My father's voice was firm, emotionless, like he was reading from a memo. "You need to be reasonable. Sabrina's child is entitled to a portion of Noah's estate. The sooner you agree to divide the assets, the easier this will be for everyone." "Easier for who?" I said, my voice hoarse but steady. "For you? For her?" "For all of us," my mother chimed in, and that's when I realized they had me on speakerphone. I sat up slowly. "When did you know?" There was silence on the other end. That heavy, damning silence that only ever means guilt. Then my mother's voice, soft, like a confession she didn't want to own. "We've known for a while. Noah told us, maybe 7 months before the accident." 7 months. They had known for 7 months. They let me hold Noah's cold hand at the funeral. Sobbing into a dress Sabrina helped me pick. They hugged me when I couldn't stop crying. They sat at my table every Sunday eating the meals I cooked, sipping wine I paid for, all while carrying the secret. And still they took my money. Every month. $3,000 wired automatically into their account because I believed naively that we were rebuilding something. That losing Noah had softened them. That for the first time in decades they actually saw me. I laughed. A short, dry sound that cracked the stillness of the room. "You're disgusting," I said. "All of you." My dad scoffed. "Watch your tone, young lady. You think this is easy for us." "No," I snapped. "I think this is exactly who you are. And I'm the idiot who kept hoping you'd change." I hung up and immediately opened my banking app. I deleted the recurring transfer in 2 taps. It felt surgical. Clean, like cutting off a tumor. Let Sabrina take care of them. Let their golden girl pay their bills with her non-existent smoothie business and half-finished life coach certification. Let her feed them lies along with whatever leftovers she scrapes together in that dingy apartment across town. As for me, I was done pretending I still belonged to that family. That night, I packed up a box of Noah's things, his watch, his favorite hoodie, the framed photo from our honeymoon, and shoved it into the back of the closet. I couldn't look at him anymore. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I knew this much. The next time they came for me, they'd find a different woman waiting. 3 weeks passed. I didn't hear from my parents again. Not directly, at least. But Sabrina? She was relentless. At first it was more photos, then voicemails, some sad and trembling. others sharp with entitlement. I stopped listening. I stopped looking. I stopped feeling, until the letter came. Thick envelope. Formal font. A law firm I didn't recognize. I opened it on the kitchen counter, the same spot where Noah used to cut vegetables while humming under his breath. My fingers trembled. Inside was a copy of the legal complaint. Sabrina Carter, plaintiff, filing for a 50% claim to Noah Monroe's estate on behalf of her unborn child. It used the word voluntarily in describing the division she expected from me, but it read like a threat. The letter said I had 10 days to respond. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked to the sink, turned on the cold water, and let it run over my wrists until the numbness crawled back up my spine. Then I pulled out my laptop and started looking for an attorney. I didn't need a bulldog. I needed a surgeon, someone who could dismantle a lie without missing a single cut. It took 4 days, 5 consultations, and 1 phone call that ended with me slamming the laptop shut in tears before I found Marcus Kellerman. His office was small, lined with law books and silent trophies. He listened carefully, taking notes with a fountain pen, not interrupting once. When I finished talking, he looked up and said, "Your sister's going to regret putting this on paper." "But she has proof," I said. "Photos, texts my parents will testify." He nodded, his face unreadable. "They'll make the court sympathetic, especially since she's carrying a child. Judges don't like leaving babies out in the cold. So I don't stand a chance." I didn't say that. He flipped a page in my file. I said she'll make the court sympathetic. But sympathy doesn't override fact. And truth has a funny way of surviving the mud. I exhaled just barely. Marcus agreed to take the case. Told me to forward every text, every voicemail, every email. We would build a timeline. Reconstruct Noah's assets. Review the trust and its contingencies. He was calm, precise, and expensive. I didn't care. That night, as I prepared the documents he asked for, my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in me paused. I answered. "Is this Valerie Monroe?" a woman asked. Her voice was calm, controlled, but underneath it, something cracked. "Yes. Who's calling?" "I'm Evelyn Monroe," she said. "Noah's mother." The world tilted again. I reached for the countertop like I had during the baby shower, my knees suddenly soft. I was told she died." There was a pause. "Noah told you that," she said. "He lied. About many things. And if you're willing, I think it's time you knew the rest." We met the next morning at a small cafe tucked between a florist and a consignment shop downtown. I got there early, more from nerves and punctuality, and sat in the corner booth furthest from the door. My coffee cooled untouched. My fingers wouldn't stop shaking. When Evelyn Monroe walked in, I recognized her instantly, not because I had seen her before, but because she looked like Noah. The eyes, the posture, even the way she moved, graceful but guarded, was him. For a second, my throat tightened and I had to look away. She sat across from me, setting her leather bag gently on the seat beside her. No makeup, hair pulled into a simple twist. A woman who didn't come to impress, only to be heard. "I was at the funeral," she said softly. "Back row. Black veil. I left before the service ended. I didn't think I had the right to mourn him publicly." I remembered her now, a quiet figure in the shadows that day, one I'd chalked up to distant family or neighbor. I never imagined. "He told me you were dead," I whispered. Evelyn's lips pressed together, not in anger. Something sadder, something older. Noah had his reasons for cutting ties. They weren't all unjustified, but lying about my death, that was cruel even for him. I looked at her then, really looked. There were years of pain in her face, a woman who had survived more than just her son's betrayal. "I heard what your sister's doing," she said, pulling out a worn envelope from her bag. "And I can't stay silent. Not again." She slid it across the table. Inside were hospital records. Hartford General, Dated 11 years ago. I scanned the pages, my pulse pounding louder with every line. Complete azoospermia. Permanently sterile. No natural conception possible. The words blurred for a second as my vision fogged. I had to reread them. This isn't possible, I muttered. We spent years trying to have a baby. Fertility specialists, hormone injections, tracking cycles. He held my hand through every appointment. He knew? Evelyn said gently. He got the diagnosis at 26. He was devastated. It was the last thing we ever talked about before we stopped speaking. A part of me crumbled right there in that booth. The grief, the guilt, the months I spent thinking something was wrong with me, they all unraveled into a new shape: rage. I had lived in silence, blamed my body, begged the universe for something no one knew would never happen because he'd already decided I didn't deserve the truth. Evelyn reached across the table, her hand soft and trembling. I know it doesn't undo the betrayal, but if Sabrina's child isn't his, you deserve to know, and the court needs to know. I nodded slowly. Would you be willing to take a DNA test? If they ask for confirmation. I came prepared for that, she said. I'm not afraid of the truth anymore. For the first time in months, something inside me shifted. Not peace, not yet, but clarity, the kind that steadies you after a long, disorienting storm. I left that cafe with the envelope pressed to my chest like armor. Noah had built a house of lies, but I was done living in it. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in energy, the kind of cold that sinks into your skin and settles in your spine. I sat at the defendant's table, eyes locked straight ahead, trying not to look at the woman sitting just a few feet away from me. My sister, Sabrina Carter, wearing a black wrap dress, minimal makeup, and an expression of polished grief. She held the baby in her arms like a shield. My parents were behind her. My mother's hand rested on Sabrina's shoulder, while my father leaned forward with quiet intensity, the kind he used to reserve for job interviews and tax audits. Across the aisle, Marcus Kellerman flipped through his notes, calm and meticulous as always. She's rehearsed, he said under his breath. But truth doesn't need rehearsal, just timing. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The sound of heels and polished shoes against linoleum echoed like gunfire. Opening statements came and went. Sabrina's attorney painted a heartbreaking picture: a widowed sister, pregnant with the only child of a man gone too soon. She spoke about legacy, about responsibility, about family. She even cried on cue. And then it was her turn to speak. Sabrina walked to the witness stand, the baby cradled in her arms like a trophy. Her voice quivered just enough. Noah loved me. We didn't mean for it to happen, but sometimes love doesn't ask for permission. We were planning to tell Valerie after the divorce. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. All I want is what's fair for our child. He deserves his father's name, his home, his inheritance. The judge nodded, neutral. Thank you, Ms. Carter. Mrs. Monroe, your counsel may proceed. Marcus stood slowly, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, we have reason to believe that Ms. Carter's claims are not only misleading, but entirely false. We request that this court consider medical documentation relevant to Mr. Monroe's reproductive health. He handed a sealed folder to the bailiff, who brought it to the bench. The judge skimmed through the contents, her face unreadable. Where did this come from? Sabrina's lawyer demanded. From Mr. Monroe's biological mother, Evelyn Monroe, Marcus replied, turning toward the back of the courtroom. Who is present and willing to testify. Gasps rippled across the room. Sabrina's head snapped up. Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time that day, her composure cracked. Evelyn stood. She looked older than she had at the cafe. Perhaps it was the lighting or the gravity of the moment, but her voice was clear. Your Honor, I'm here to provide a DNA sample. If this child is my grandson, I will not stand in the way of his rights. But if he is not, the truth deserves to be known. The judge nodded once. DNA testing is hereby ordered. This court will reconvene when results are available. Sabrina looked like she was about to faint. Her skin had gone pale. She clutched the baby tighter, then turned toward her mother with panicked eyes. But for once, there was no comfort there, just quiet confusion. As the gavel struck and everyone began to rise, I remained seated for a beat longer. I wasn't shaking anymore. For the first time in months, I felt still. The courtroom was silent when the judge returned with the envelope. I could hear the faint rustling of papers, the baby's soft breathing, and somewhere behind me, a woman whispering a prayer under her breath. Sabrina sat rigid, her arms wrapped around the sleeping child. Her face was a mask, composed but too still. The judge cleared her throat. "These results confirm," she began, eyes scanning the room with clinical precision, "that there is no genetic match between the child in question and Mrs. Evelyn Monroe. Therefore, the court finds that Noah Monroe is not the biological father of the child." A sharp gasp escaped from someone in the gallery. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father sank back in his seat, eyes wide and unblinking. But it was Sabrina's face that held me. For the first time, there was no performance, no smug smile, just collapse. She shook her head once, slowly, then again, faster, like she could rewind the moment by sheer force of will. "That's not possible," she said, her voice barely audible. "No, those records are fake. She faked them. She made it all up." The judge held up a hand. "Ms. Carter, sit down." But Sabrina wouldn't. She stood now, clutching the baby with one arm and waving her other hand in the air like a drowning swimmer reaching for a lifeline. "I was seeing someone else," she blurted, her voice cracking. "Okay, I was seeing more than one person when Noah died. But I thought it had to be him. He had the most to leave behind." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, the shifting of bodies. My parents looked like statues, pale, silent, hollow. The judge raised her voice over the noise. "Let the record show that Ms. Carter admits to knowingly deceiving this court and the defendant with fraudulent claims. This court rules in favor of Valerie Monroe. All claims to the estate filed by Ms. Carter are permanently dismissed." The gavel dropped like thunder. Just like that, it was over. Sabrina sank back into her chair, her makeup streaked with tears, holding a child who had no idea he'd just lost everything his mother had tried to steal. The lie collapsed under its own weight. And the truth, it stood quietly in the light. Outside the courtroom, I stepped into the sun like it was the first time I'd seen it in months. Evelyn was waiting by the curb, a hand on the door of her car. When she saw me, she didn't say anything, just opened her arms. I didn't hesitate. We stood like that for a long time. I had walked into that courthouse with grief, betrayal, and a mountain of doubt, and walked out with something unexpected. Not revenge, not justice, just freedom. My parents caught up to me in the courthouse parking lot. My mother's cheeks were streaked with tears, her eyes bloodshot and searching. My father looked smaller, not just older, but diminished somehow, like the air around him had been pulled away. "Valerie," she whispered, reaching for my hand. "Sweetheart, we didn't know. We didn't know she was lying." I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I pulled out my phone, pressed 3 buttons, and held it up so they could see. Their names. Blocked. Permanently. My mother gasped. My father didn't say a word. "I warned you," I said quietly. "You chose her. And now you live with that choice." Then I turned and walked toward Evelyn, who was waiting by her car, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun. She opened the door, but paused when I approached. "You okay?" she asked. I surprised us both by laughing. Not out of joy, but something close to peace. "I think I will be." We stood there for a moment, watching the people spill out of the courthouse behind us like they were leaving a theater, as if our lives were just a show that had finally reached its final act. I reached into my purse and pulled out a keyring. One key, silver, Smooth edges. This is for the apartment, I said. Downtown. The one Noah left me. I never liked it. Too many ghosts. But maybe you'd like it. Evelyn froze. Valerie, no. I couldn't. You gave me the truth, I said. You gave me back my life. Let me give you this. She cried, quietly, the way women cry when they've been strong for far too long. Il était hol aimé. It was the safest I'd felt in years. A week later, I signed over the deed. She called it too generous. I called it balance. Since then, I've started building a life that's mine. Not inherited. Not constructed from Noah's shadow. Mine. I went back to work full-time. Marcus introduced me to his wife, who got me into a hiking club. I hated it the first few weeks. Mud, sweat, the blisters, but there was something about climbing a hill alone and standing at the top that made everything below feel manageable. I took a solo trip to Vermont, rented a cabin. No cell service, no expectations. Just me, a stack of old books, and the sound of wind through trees. I cried one night, then slept 12 hours straight. It was the best sleep I'd had since the funeral. Sabrina sent a letter last month. Handwritten. The envelope was pale pink, the handwriting painfully familiar. She said she was sorry, that she had changed, that she needed help. I didn't open it. I dropped it into the trash without a second thought. Some endings don't need to be rewritten. I still see Evelyn every Sunday. We cook together. Talk about Noah, not the version who lied, but the little boy she once knew. The one who collected rocks and named squirrels. She tells me stories that soften the jagged edges. I let them. Yesterday, I packed the last of his things. A few went to charity. The rest, to a storage unit I'll probably forget exists. When I looked at myself in the mirror this morning, I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked free. I lost the family I was born into, but I found one I chose. And maybe, just maybe, that's the only kind that ever truly lasts.